What's up, guys? Today I want to do a different style episode. So as many of you know, if you watch this channel, I live in the Sacramento area of California, but I recently completed a trip to Northwest Arkansas where I was helping take care of a sick family member for an extended period of time. And I ended up doing quite a few high school games while I was there. Now, high school in California is played in the winter season. High school in Arkansas is played in the spring. And I went right at the end of March and then stayed for almost 2 months. So I was able to be in California for the entire high school season. And I was able to be in Arkansas for almost the entire high school season. So it was very interesting. But let's just quickly take a look at the areas I was officiating. So I live in the Sacramento area. And typically, if I zoom in here a little bit, where I officiate high school, I live in the Roseville area, but it's kind of up to north to Yuba City, west over to Colfax and Placerville over down here, down to Elk Grove and Galt sometimes, and all the way over possibly to Fairfield is our area. I don't normally go to this area very often. Normally, I officiate in this area here. And if we take a look at where I was at in Arkansas, zooming in here a little bit, we're really up here in the northwest corner. So kind of staying up here in this kind of area around Siloam Springs, a little bit north here, but ended up officiating everything kind of, nothing in Oklahoma, nothing in Missouri, but all the way down here to a couple of games in the Fort Smith area. Definitely here in this Bentonville, Springdale, Fayetteville corridor, a little bit over here to the west area, Huntsville, Green Forest and whatnot over here, but primarily in this area, a few games down here in the south. Now, if I take a quick look at the number of games that I ended up officiating over this period, in California, I ended up doing 88 matches over the winter. 46 of those were varsity, 32 JV, 10 freshman, sophomore, and I ended up having the whistle on 43 of those. Now, that includes anywhere I had them on the varsity JV and freshman games. In Arkansas, I did a total of 44 matches, 42 of which were varsity, only 2 of which were JV. They have a lot smaller programs there, not nearly as many games per night, or the boys and girls maybe play on the same night. Most of the schools in California have multiple teams, so that just leads to more games, but also had a kind of a similar number of center referee assignments, though more of them in the varsity program there. Now, over that period, I got quite a bit of exposure to both programs, and I just kind of want to share my thoughts of comparing those two. Now, these are 100% just my opinion, and while I'm going to make some generalizations, please know that individual cases, can be good, bad, both ways. So let's talk first about quality of gameplay. So where do I think this fits between both of the areas? I really have to give this one to California, and kind of over here in this range, quite a bit better quality of play in California on the field with the players. Now, this is not meant to say that every single California team would beat every single Arkansas team. I'm just saying probably I think the California best of the best is better than the Arkansas best of the best. But just taking a quick look at the teams in Arkansas that I was able to do. I'm looking at sportsillustrated.com, where I was told had some of the best information. They've got kind of a top 25 ranked teams here. I ended up doing about 5 of these schools, seeing them over the course of my time there, and including some at the very, very top. And if I were to compare that to California, my own son's team high school, they're only ranked 44th or 45th, I think, in California. And, I think that they would have beat almost every team that I saw in Arkansas. So got to give a little bit of that to California here. But not to say that they have bad teams in Arkansas. And certainly a lot of California teams that I would see those Arkansas teams just mop the floor with. This could be a sensitive topic here, and I'm going to have to make some generalizations, even though any individuals are completely left out of this. I'm talking about across the board, general quality of the pool. So I will say the pool of referees in Arkansas was much, much smaller. There's a lot fewer games, a lot fewer referees. The pool of referees in California is much, much bigger. And I think if I were to compare the best of the best referees that I saw in Arkansas with the best of the best referees I see in California, I got to put them pretty equal. Now, I'm not a referee assessor, so just factor that in. This is just me working with fellow officials. But I think as you look across the field of referees, I was very impressed with the quality of the referee officials in Arkansas, kind of across the board at all scales. So I got to give like a minor edge to Arkansas. But again, I think a big part of that is just the breadth of the pool of officials, and they may need so many more officials in California. And I think in Arkansas, because they need such a smaller pool, it really ends up being only the officials who take it the most serious or the most dedicated that go into it. And so it was just very impressive, the quality of officiating that they had there. Not to say that we have bad officials in California at all. I'm just saying, kind of, if you were to take the average across the good and the bad, that's what I saw. Talking a little bit about player and coach spectator behavior. I honestly feel like on the field, I got to give this one to Arkansas. Like the level of respect that the players showed each other, the level of respect that the coaches showed each other, as well as the officials, I think was higher in Arkansas than I see in California. Not to say that there weren't some bad apples that I saw there. It was very good to see that in Arkansas and kind of across the board, across all games. It was impressive. Now let's talk a little bit about spectator behavior, because that was a different story. So I've really got to give the edge on this one to California by quite a bit of a long shot. So what was interesting, I'm talking specifically about high school soccer. In Arkansas, it seemed like the knowledge of the spectators was quite a bit lower, but also the level of entitlement that those spectators felt in order to yell at the officials was quite a bit higher. And so they were very loud, very vocal, very persistent. Now they weren't cursing, they weren't threatening, but just the persistence and chirping from the stands was significantly more than we see in California. Now that's not to say that we don't see that sometimes in California, but I just thought it was interesting the way that they approached it and the way they felt entitled to yell at the officials. Just to give a little bit of example of this, not to pick on any one game, but I did pick one where I had good audio. Here's a perfectly legal throw-in. So he's obviously on the line, perfectly legal. Not sure what they're complaining about there. Comments about one of the no calls.
On his shoulder.
And then here's a perfectly good throw. So again, I don't mean to pick on any individual game or any individual thing, just that kind of thing happened persistently throughout a lot of the games there. And that's not to say that some of that doesn't ever happen in California. It just seemed more persistent, and there weren't people who maybe did know more of the rules who could go over and talk to those people who didn't to talk them down. What's also interesting is if I were to compare this spectator behavior to club soccer instead of high school soccer, this ranking changes dramatically. I would put Arkansas way over to the right. Now, I only worked probably close to a dozen games while I was there, so it's not like I had a big pool to pull from, but the spectator behavior was way better for everything I saw, except for kind of one team I had a couple of times. But that was an interesting dynamic as well. So this would be the club soccer ranking. The next thing I saw that was significantly different was mercy rule. So in California, there is no mercy rule. You play the full time no matter what happens. In Arkansas, they had a mercy rule, and I'm going to put this ranking way over here at Arkansas and give them the win on this one, because they had a rule that if any team was winning by at least 6 goals at any time in the second half, then the remaining time in the second half would be cut in half and there would be no more clock stoppages. So that was really nice. I've seen players get injured in games before where we were trying to play to full time in a game that was 12-0. There's no real value in that, in my opinion. So I really like the Arkansas rule. I'm also told that Missouri has a rule that if a game ends up at 8-goal differential, the game just terminates at that point. I actually think, listening to those two, I kind of like the idea of what if you went to at 6-goal differential, the remaining time is cut in half, and at 8 or 10-goal differential, the game just ends. But really like that and thought it was good. So next, let's talk about pregame mechanics and a few things that referees are expected to do before a match begins. In particular, I want to look at Rule 5.3 of the NFHS rulebook, where it talks about the referee's pregame responsibility and that we need to conduct a pregame conference with the head coach and team captains and look at pertinent rules, address good sportsmanship, do the coin toss, but then also inquire of each head coach whether the players will be properly and legally equipped at the kickoff. And then if we pop over and we look at Rule 1, Section 5, where it talks about the team areas in the NFHS rulebook, and then it talks about how the team areas shall extend from 10 yards on each side of the halfway line for a distance of 20 yards, and each area shall be marked by a solid line. Coaches, bench personnel, and team members shall be restricted to the team area. Now, I know those end up getting technical and they actually seem like, what's the big deal? But they are written for a reason. And I will say, generally, California, at least in my area, has made those a point of emphasis to enforce. So I got to give this one to California. So in California, we always have that pregame meeting with the coaches. And generally, we do a good job of cleaning up the technical areas. Arkansas, that wasn't a point of emphasis at all. I saw almost no referees doing that. And honestly, I think since our association started enforcing the technical areas and having that pre-meeting, it has helped some, and I think Arkansas would benefit from that. Carrying on to the facilities. So understood that most of the facilities are actually set up for football and not soccer, but I got to give the win on this one to Arkansas. So one, the football stadiums were really big, really nice, generally speaking. Now, there were some older ones, but some of them were just almost like going to college campuses. But also, almost every single school provided their soccer referees with a changing room where you could leave your stuff. If it was raining, you could keep it out of the rain. Private space that you could change if you needed to change beforehand. They don't really do that in California. What's interesting also, though, in California is I officiate other sports, and they do actually provide that room in other sports, specifically football, where I've seen it, but they don't do it in soccer for some reason, and I'd like to see that adopted. Now let's talk a little bit about clock management. So I want to be clear, both states play under NFHS rules where the rules state when the clock should be stopped and therefore longer time in the game. But the mechanics of how you do that is different between the states. In California, while they do have this clock on the scoreboard, they start that at 40 minutes, start it running, it never stops until it reaches 2 minutes, and then they stop the scoreboard clock at 2 minutes, and then the referee keeps the time on their watch. So they add the appropriate time and they end at the appropriate time on their watch. In Arkansas, however, the official clock is kept on the scoreboard, and you manage that by you give a signal like this whenever you need to stop time, and then you wind your arm whenever you need to start time. In my opinion, the problem with that becomes the scoreboard operator isn't getting it exactly right anyway, right? There's lots of times that I'd do this and, another 5-7 seconds would run off the clock, sometimes even more, before they finally stopped it. And then we'd restart. There was one time, I think it was probably 20 seconds after it restarted, I looked up and the clock was still not started. So it wasn't exactly accurate. And there were definitely times that I saw a goal or shot get taken, and there was one time I was an assistant referee, and I saw the ball go in the goal, and then I saw the clock out of the corner of my eye, and the goal was good, but it was within 1 second. I saw another one where the shot was taken, but the ball wasn't yet in the goal. It introduces all this controversy and uncertainty. And honestly, I think it's better and it's more in the spirit of the game of soccer and the culture of soccer to have the referee manage that and control it. Now, I want to give a very specific example of how I feel like this clock management affects games. This was a match with about 1.5 minutes left in the game. Tied match, both teams fighting to win, and we see there's a foul here. I call the foul, and as they're getting up, this player lightly kicks this ball away. Now, in a normal game in California, I would never in a million years do anything with that, but because he kicks that ball away specifically to delay them getting going here, I go ahead, come in, I give him a yellow card, and then I have to stop, and then I stop the clock because I'm wanting to give them that time back, and the only way to do that is to stop the clock there. Whereas if this was in California, I would never give a yellow card there. Not in 100 years would I give a yellow card for that for no further than he kicked the ball. I mean, definitely if he booted it way out, but that was not a hard kick. So with all of that in mind, I've got to give the win here definitely to California, or at least win in my personal preference. Now let's talk a little bit about ball handlers. And what I mean by ball holders is specifically Rule 6 of the high school rulebook says that the home team is supposed to provide at least 2 ball holders to go and retrieve the balls and keep the balls in play. Now I want to give a very specific example of what this looks like. So our ball handler is actually just a hair off the screen here. He's a kid in the blue shirt, and we're going to see here this ball gets kicked out of bounds right there. This ball handler just throws the guy the next ball, and they can just go back to playing. Works really well. Here's another example from earlier in that match. We can see here, right here, this ball gets out of bounds. Kid picks up the ball, make sure that the players have a ball, and they go right back to playing. I felt that worked really well throughout the matches. Loved how that was. Have to give the win on this one to Arkansas because they do not do that at all in California from anything I've seen. And in fact, we even remind schools about it when we get into the playoffs, and they still don't do it. And I will say I don't have any empathy at all for those schools when they start complaining about a team time wasting. If you don't have ball handlers, then you're wasting time yourself, is my opinion. But yeah, and they took it very seriously in Arkansas. It was awesome to see. So now let's talk a little bit about referee pay. So what's interesting is varsity games in California pay $87.50 per game to all 3 officials. Varsity games in Arkansas paid $70, assuming you had more than 1 game. There was an extra bonus in Arkansas if you were only working 1 game instead of 2. They don't have that in California. There was also a mileage allotment. They pay you a little bit for your gas money, not a full federal rate, but definitely something that made it a little bit easier. So if you traveled further, at least your gas was covered. And they paid it on all games, regardless of the distance that you traveled. So that was really nice in Arkansas. The other big difference was that in California, all the schools pay directly through an app. And then that app pulls all of your payments together, and you receive one 1099 for all of your referee pay, and you pay taxes on that. In Arkansas, each school pays individually, and they send you a check as a contractor working for that specific school, and you only receive the 1099 if you're above the federal threshold of minimum amount earned on a contract or from a contractor in order to receive a 1099. Now, I am not a tax accountant. I don't want to get into that, and I don't want to get myself in any trouble, so I'm going to leave that there and let you decide which one is the best for you. But I will say, I actually really liked the way that Arkansas did that. It is more of a hassle to chase the money some, but there was definitely some benefits to how they did it, and I really liked the mileage setup that if you need to travel a little bit further, you got something for your expenses there. Now, to tie all this together into a final list of recommendations, honestly, I had a fantastic time in both areas, good soccer in both areas, and great people in both areas. But if I could make suggestions to both the high school association and their referees in each area, this is what it would be. So in California, I would recommend adopting the mercy rule, starting to have ball holders at every single school and taking it seriously. That helped the game flow. And then providing a referee changing room, or where you can keep your stuff and keep it dry and that kind of stuff. In Arkansas, what I would recommend is that the refs keep the time on the field rather than officially on the clock. I think that's a much better way to do it. Somehow addressing spectator behavior at the high school level, I do think that was a problem, and what I saw there was a little bit concerning. And then making sure we're following those rules of having that pre-meeting with the coaches, having them confirm that the players will be legally and properly equipped, and then enforcing the team areas and making sure people are where they're supposed to be. Those are small things that show that you take it seriously and set the tone for a game. Now, I also go back to, I mentioned that the player and coach respect level between themselves and with the referees was a little bit better in Arkansas, so maybe that's why they haven't needed to focus on that. But me being a perfectionist, I a little bit like to see those things cleaned up. So So that kind of wraps up my, this summary of my experience having officiated this past high school season in California as well as Arkansas. Some of the differences I saw. Hope you found it interesting. Let me know what they do in your area and what you would like to see. But, if you ever get a chance to referee outside of your area, I think it's very helpful to see how things are done differently, meet other officials, and just pull out the best that you can get. Hope you found this interesting. And I hope you join us back here for our next upload.